June 29, 1944. Normandy, France. The hedgerows were alive with gunfire. Smoke drifted low across the fields, clinging to the wet grass and burnt soil. The thunder of tank engines rolled through the valley like distant storms, their guttural roars echoing off stone farmhouses shattered by artillery. Inside one of those Sherman tanks, a battered M4A1 of the 2nd Armored Division, Staff Sergeant Tom Avery, a 24-year-old gunner from Ohio, hunched over his sight. Sweat ran down the inside of his helmet. The air stank of oil, cordite, and the acrid tang of fear. Panzer ahead. 75 meters, right of that barn, yelled Corporal Jenkins, the tank's commander, slamming his boot against the turret floor. The crew jolted into motion. Avery adjusted the traverse handwheel, his gloved fingers slick and trembling. Through his sight, he caught a glimpse, gray steel cutting through the smoke. A Panzer IV, its long 75mm gun glinting under the fractured sunlight, advancing slowly, confidently. Avery's first shot went wide, too high. It clanged off the German tank's turret, sparking uselessly. Hit it again. Jenkins barked. He reloaded. The loader, Private Russo, rammed another shell into the breach, shouting, "Up," as the shell locked in. Avery exhaled, steadied the sight, fired again. The round struck the Panzer square on the glassy plate, and bounced. The ricochet screamed into the hedgerow, detonating harmlessly in the distance. "God damn it!" Avery hissed. The crew cursed. The Sherman rocked as it reversed hastily, its driver grinding gears to find cover behind a stone wall. The Panzer's gun swiveled toward them. Incoming. The German shell smashed into the wall in front of them, showering the Sherman with debris. The tank shuddered under the impact. Dust filled the compartment. Avery coughed, blinking through the haze. "We can't pen that bastard," he muttered. "Not head-on." But then, as he wiped the grime from his sight, something caught his attention, a faint misalignment in the vertical mark of his reticle. He'd noticed it before, back in England during training, but dismissed it as a factory quirk. Now, staring death in the face, it gnawed at him. 1 inch, he whispered. "What?" Jenkins shouted, still scanning through the commander's periscope. Avery reached up, adjusted the gun's elevation dial, just 1 notch, 1 tiny click downward. "Sight's been off." "I'm correcting it." 1 inch. Russo stared at him. "You sure you wanna experiment now?" "Yeah," Avery growled. "Now's the time." The Panzer rolled forward again, its treads grinding through the mud, the barrel lowering. Avery waited, patient, calm. His pulse slowed. "Range, 75, Jenkins called. "On it." Avery adjusted again, barely breathing. The crosshair rested not on the turret, not on the hull, but just below the Panzer's front plate, where the armor angled downward toward the transmission housing. The weak spot. He fired. The Sherman rocked backward. A blinding flash illuminated the field. For a split second, silence, then the German tank erupted in a plume of smoke and flame. The round had pierced the lower glacis, detonating inside the fighting compartment. "Direct hit!" Russo yelled, pounding Avery's shoulder. "You got him." Through the haze, Avery saw the Panzer's hatch fly open, black smoke pouring out. The enemy crew scrambled, their machine guns silent now. The once invincible beast was burning. Inside the Sherman, the crew erupted in disbelief. Laughter, shouting, relief, all mingled with the hum of the engine and the crackle of distant gunfire. Jenkins leaned down, shaking his head. 1 inch, huh? Avery smiled faintly, wiping soot from his cheek. "Sometimes," he said, "that's all it takes." Outside, the battle still raged, but something had shifted. For the first time, that crew believed their Sherman could go toe-to-toe with Germany's armored giants. And in the fields of Normandy, a legend had just begun. July 2, 1944. Near Hill 112, south of Cannes. The air was heavy with the smell of burning fuel and churned earth. The 2nd Armored Division had pushed deeper into the Bocage country, where every field was a fortress and every hedgerow concealed a threat. For Sergeant Tom Avery's Sherman crew, the victory over that Panzer IV had been brief, a flash of triumph swallowed by the grinding reality of war. Their tank, Doris, named after Jenkins's wife back home in Kansas, was scratched, dented, and streaked with dried mud. Yet it kept rolling, part of a column advancing toward Hill 112, a critical rise dominating the surrounding countryside. The Germans wanted it back, and they were throwing everything they had at it: panzers, tigers, mortars, and fanatical infantry. "Keep your eyes peeled," Jenkins muttered from the commander's hatch, his field glasses sweeping the treeline. "Intel says the 12th SS Panzer's been spotted regrouping ahead." Avery adjusted his periscope. The tank jolted as it rolled over uneven ground, the engine whining. Rousseau sat to his right, fiddling with another 75mm shell, armor-piercing, capped ballistic cap, APCBC. "Still can't believe that shot back there," Rousseau said, grinning through a smudge of soot. 1 inch. "You got some kinda sixth sense or what?" Avery didn't answer. He was staring at the gun sight, tracing the crosshairs, memorizing the subtle imperfection that had saved their lives. The correction had been instinct, not luck, the product of long nights on the range, thousands of simulated shots, and the desperate intuition that only came from being under fire. Suddenly, Jenkins froze. Movement. Right flank, Tiger tank. The name alone was enough to turn every heartbeat in the Sherman cold. A Tiger eye, its thick armor gleaming with mud, broke through the hedgerow like a metal avalanche. The massive 88mm cannon swung toward them with mechanical grace, slow but certain. "Driver, reverse. Smoke out." Jenkins barked. The Sherman jolted backward, spewing white smoke as Rousseau loaded another shell. "Up." "Range?" Avery demanded. 400 meters. Avery aimed through the murk, but the Tiger's outline was fading into the haze. He couldn't see its front plate, only the faint glimmer of its turret ring. He exhaled, steady. 1 inch rule, he muttered again. He compensated, slightly low, slightly left, anticipating the Tiger's slow turn. On the way. The gun thundered. The shell streaked through the smoke, and struck the Tiger's turret ring dead center. Sparks exploded. For a moment, nothing. Then, a flash. The Tiger's turret jerked, jammed halfway through its rotation. "You hit his ring," Jenkins shouted. "He's stuck." But the Tiger wasn't dead. Its 88 roared in reply, the shell screamed past, ripping through the branches above them. The concussion alone shook the Sherman's hull. Loader, another AP. Up. Avery aimed again. The Tiger, immobilized, tried to pivot its hull. He fired a second shot, this time just beneath the gun mantlet. The round penetrated. Fire burst from the Tiger's vision slit. The tank belched smoke, its crew scrambling to escape. Rousseau whooped, slamming the breach closed again. "That's 2, Tommy. 2 Panzers." Jenkins let out a long, disbelieving breath. "You just turned that Tiger into scrap." The rest of the platoon was catching up now, Shermans moving through the fog, their commanders shouting over the radio. The German counterattack faltered as infantry fell back, abandoning their burning armor. Inside Doris, Avery sat in silence, hands still on the sight, eyes locked forward. That 1-inch correction, a simple mechanical tweak, had changed everything. It had given him confidence. Precision. A sense of control in a war that offered none. But deep down, he knew luck had played its hand too. And luck, on the battlefields of Normandy, never lasted forever. As they crested the ridge of Hill 112, the sound of artillery grew louder, rolling like thunder across the valleys below. Smoke rose from the distant town of Esquay. Somewhere out there, more panzers waited, and Avery's next test was already rumbling toward him. July 3, 1944. The outskirts of Esquay, Normandy. The morning broke under a grey sky, thick with mist and the bitter scent of cordite. Dew clung to the hedgerows, those ancient, earthen walls that made every Normandy field a death trap. The Shermans crept forward one by one, their engines idling low, their steel hulls camouflaged by branches and dust. Inside Doris, the crew was quiet. Even Rousseau, usually all jokes and chatter, kept his head down, polishing the next shell in silence. The tension was suffocating. Every creak, every bird call could mean the approach of another ambush. "Feels like the world's holding its breath," Jenkins murmured, scanning the terrain through his commander's hatch. "They're out there. I can feel it." Avery sat behind the gun sight, the green glow of his periscope flickering. The memory of the tiger still haunted him, not the kill, but the timing. That fraction of a second between life and death. The realization that one wrong twitch, 1 inch the other way, and they'd all be vaporized. "Movement," the driver whispered. "Left hedgerow. About 50 meters." Avery swung the turret slowly, his sight sweeping through leaves and shadows. He caught it, the glint of steel, low to the ground. A Panzerfaust team, crouched and waiting. "Infantry with rockets," he barked. Jenkins didn't hesitate. "Coax. Light 'em up." Avery squeezed the trigger. The .30 cal coaxial machine gun roared to life, tearing through brush and foliage. The Germans scattered, one falling backward as tracers stitched the hedgerow. Rousseau laughed under his breath, "That'll teach 'em to peek." But before they could celebrate, the right flank erupted in flame. Another Sherman, Red Dog, took a direct hit. The explosion lifted the tank off its treads, fire bursting from the hatches. The crew had no time to escape. Avery watched in horror as the tank burned, its ammo cooking off in violent bursts. "Panzer! 2 o'clock!" Jenkins shouted. The silhouette of a Panther tank emerged from the hedgerow, its sloped armor glistening with morning dew, its gun already aimed. "Driver, pivot right. Avery, you've got one shot before he does." Avery adjusted his sight, remembering the tiger, remembering the 1-inch rule. The Panther's armor was even tougher, thick frontal plating, only vulnerable at its lower hull and turret ring. "Up!" Rousseau shouted, slamming in an AP round. Avery exhaled, calm despite the chaos. "On the way." The shot fired. The shell hit the Panther, sparks, smoke, but no penetration. "Didn't get through." Rousseau yelled. The Panther's 75mm gun barked in response. The shell screamed past their left side, gouging a crater in the road and pelting the Sherman with dirt and shrapnel. "Reverse! Reverse!" Jenkins ordered. The Sherman jolted backward, grinding gears. Avery lined up another shot, this time adjusting lower, just as he'd done before. His gloved finger steadied on the trigger. "Come on." He fired. The round struck just below the Panther's gun mantlet, the one place where armor met angle. The impact was brutal. For a heartbeat, nothing, then a bloom of orange fire from the tank's front as internal ammunition ignited. The Panther stopped moving. Its turret drooped like a dying animal. Rousseau slammed his fist on the breech. "That's 3, Tommy. 3 damn cats down." The crew cheered, but Jenkins didn't smile. He looked toward the burning wreck of Red Dog, jaw clenched. "We're losing good men for every tank we drop," he muttered. Avery nodded silently. Through the smoke, he saw the remains of Red Dog's crew being dragged from the wreck by medics. The triumph in his chest faded, replaced by something heavier. War had a way of balancing the scales. Every victory came with a cost. He turned back to his sight, adjusting the elevation again, 1 inch down, 1 inch up, almost ritual now. But deep down, he wondered how long this fragile advantage would last. The Germans were learning too. Every battle taught them how the Americans fought, how their gunners aimed, how their tanks moved. In the bocage of Normandy, it wasn't just who had the better machine. It was who learned faster, who adapted quicker under fire. And Avery, the man with the 1-inch adjustment, was learning that lesson with every shot. July 5, 1944. Near Saint-André-de-l'Épine, west of Caen. The rain had come hard overnight, turning the roads into thick, sucking rivers of mud. Dawn was a dull, gray bruise on the horizon, the kind of morning when the world felt half dead. But the radio was alive with chatter. The Germans were mounting a counterattack. Jenkins's voice cut through the static. "They're pushing armor from the east, sounds like a mix of Mark IVs and maybe a Tiger. Battalion wants us to hold the line along this road until reinforcements arrive." Rousseau groaned. "Hold the line? With what, our good looks?" Avery didn't answer. He was checking the breech, his hands steady despite the rumble in his chest. He could feel it, that instinct again, the same pulse that had guided every shot since the first Panzer. Doris sat in a shallow depression overlooking a crossroad flanked by hedgerows. Perfect ambush ground, for either side. Avery scanned through the sight, watching as the mist rolled and shifted across the fields. Then came the sound. Deep, rhythmic clanking, treads grinding over wet earth. The kind of sound that crawled into your bones before you even saw the source. Contact front. Jenkins snapped. Range 300, 2 Panzers, maybe 3. Up, shouted Rousseau, slamming another AP round into place. Avery peered through the sight, and there they were, 2 Panzer IVs emerging from the fog like ghosts, guns forward, infantry running alongside. The lead tank stopped, its turret beginning to traverse. "Take the lead," Jenkins barked. Avery adjusted slightly down and right, his mind already compensating. On the way. The round screamed across the field. The first Panzer burst into fire, its hatches blowing open. The second swung its gun toward Doris, muzzle flash blooming like a camera flash in the mist. "Hit incoming!" Jenkins yelled. The shell struck the Sherman's front plate, tearing off a chunk of armor and slamming the crew forward. The world went white for a second. Avery's ears rang. Rousseau was coughing, shouting, "We're good. No penetration." Before they could breathe, a new shape loomed through the fog, a Tigerite bigger. Slower. Deadlier. "Oh hell," Rousseau muttered. "It's him again." Avery swallowed. He'd seen what an 88 could do, shred a Sherman like paper. But something in him clicked, calm as always. This was what he was made for. Load AP. Target the lower hull. Up. The Tiger was stationary now, gun aimed squarely at them. Both tanks had each other dead in their sights. Avery's heart pounded once. Twice. He could see the faint shimmer of heat from the Tiger's exhaust. The dew on its armor. The tiny vibration of its barrel as it steadied for the kill. 1 inch, he whispered, adjusting the elevation dial just below the reticle's cross. "Fire!" Jenkins yelled. Both guns thundered, 2 flashes, 1 heartbeat apart. The Tiger's shell screamed past, punching into the dirt a meter from Doris's right tread. The Sherman's shot struck the Tiger's front, sparks, smoke, then a second detonation from within. The German tank belched fire, its turret blowing free with a deafening roar. For a moment, no one spoke. Just the soft patter of rain and the hiss of burning fuel. Jenkins let out a slow breath. That's a damn Tiger, Avery." Rousseau was laughing hysterically, pounding the metal floor. "We did it again. You cooked a tiger with a Sherman. But Avery didn't move. His hands were still on the elevation dial. His breathing was steady, but his eyes were glassy, not with excitement, but realization. He knew it wasn't just the adjustment anymore. It wasn't just luck. It was instinct. Every sound, every vibration of the turret, every flicker of light on the armor, he'd learned to read it like language. Outside, the counterattack faltered. The remaining panzers turned tail, retreating through the fog. The field was littered with burning wrecks. "Report to command," Jenkins said quietly. "Tell them Saint-André is holding." Rousseau leaned back, grinning ear to ear. "Holding? Hell, we're writing the book on how to hold." Avery finally spoke. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," he murmured, still staring through the sight. "They'll be back. They always come back." And as the wind shifted, carrying the distant rumble of engines once more, he knew he was right. The war wasn't over. But for the moment, at least, 1 inch had made all the difference again. July 8, 1944. The outskirts of Saint-Lô, Normandy. 3 days after the stand at Saint-André, Avery's crew rolled south with the 2nd Armored, pushing through the heart of German resistance. The fields were a graveyard of burnt metal, twisted Shermans, wrecked half-tracks, the hulks of Panzer IVs lying silent beneath drifting smoke. The locals called this place Le Bocage de la Mort, the hedgerow of death. Every hedge was a trap, every crossroads a firing line. The Germans knew the terrain like the backs of their hands, and the Americans paid for every yard with blood. Inside Doris, it smelled of oil and sweat, gunpowder and fear. Rousseau was humming under his breath, the same tune he always used when tension built, something from Sinatra, muffled and off-key. "Cut it out," Jenkins muttered, checking the radio. "Recon says they've spotted a Pak 40 gun up ahead, somewhere near the orchard." "Another ambush?" Rousseau sighed. "These guys don't quit." Avery didn't answer. He was watching the road ahead through his sight, tracing the dark gaps between hedges. The Tiger kill at Saint-André had already spread through the company, word that a single Sherman had taken down Germany's most feared tank. Some called it luck, others skill. Avery didn't care. He just wanted to get through the next fight alive. "Driver, ease forward," Jenkins ordered. "Slow. Keep us low." The Sherman crawled forward, treads biting into the wet soil. Birds scattered from the trees. Nothing moved. The world felt too quiet. Then it came, the flash. A thunderclap of sound ripped across the field. The Pak 40 anti-tank gun opened up, its 75mm round slamming into the Sherman's right side. The hull shuddered violently, the inside filling with sparks and smoke. "Hit!" Jenkins yelled. "Damage report." Rousseau coughed, waving smoke away. "We're good." It didn't punch through. "Turret, traverse right." Avery swung the turret, fast, scanning for the gun's muzzle flash. Another round screamed past, clipping the turret cheek and leaving a deep gouge. "There!" Avery shouted. "Behind the haystack." "Load he." "Up." Avery fired, the shell tore through the haystack, exploding into a cloud of smoke and splinters. For a second, nothing. Then the gun fell silent. "Got it," Rousseau said, voice trembling. "We got the gun." But just as they started to move again, a second explosion hit, this one from the flank. The world went white. The Sherman lurched, treads grinding to a halt. Alarms blared inside the hull. The smell of burning rubber filled the air. "We're hit on the side." Jenkins shouted. "Driver, reverse." "I can't, the transmission's gone." Flames licked through the rear of the compartment. Rousseau scrambled for the extinguisher. Avery reached for another shell, but Jenkins grabbed his shoulder. "Out! Everybody out!" The crew bailed, smoke pouring from the hatches as they tumbled into the mud. Another German round shrieked overhead, missing by inches. They dove into a ditch, gasping. Behind them, Doris burned, their faithful Sherman, the tank that had survived Tigers and Panzers, now nothing but a flaming silhouette in the rain. Avery stared at it, chest heaving, the glow of the fire reflected in his eyes. Russo cursed, tears cutting through the soot on his face. "She's gone," Jenkins said quietly. "Doris is gone." They lay there for a long moment, listening to the distant rattle of machine guns and the groaning of the wounded. Finally, Jenkins broke the silence. "You did good, Tom. Damn good. Those kills you made, you saved more lives than you'll ever know." Avery didn't respond. His hands were trembling. He looked down and saw his thumb still resting against the elevation dial he'd ripped from the turret before jumping out, the same small metal ring that had changed his aim by 1 inch. He clenched it in his fist, the edges biting into his palm. That adjustment had turned him from an ordinary gunner into a tank killer. But now, watching Doris burn, it felt less like triumph and more like a burden, a symbol of how thin the line between survival and death truly was. The rain came harder. The fire dimmed. And as night fell, the crew huddled in the ditch, waiting for rescue, surrounded by the sound of distant artillery. For the first time since Normandy, Avery wasn't thinking about where to aim, only about the men they'd lost, and the inches that decided who came home. July 14, 1944. Near Saint-Lô, Normandy. The sky above was streaked with smoke trails, the air thick with the metallic taste of battle. The push toward Saint-Lô, codenamed Operation Cobra, was underway, and the U.S. Army was determined to break through the German lines once and for all. Avery's crew, what was left of it, rode in a replacement Sherman, hastily issued 2 days earlier. The new tank felt foreign, sterile, like wearing someone else's boots. The armor still smelled of factory paint. It didn't have the scars, the dents, or the soul that Doris had carried through every fight. Russo had wrapped a piece of metal around the radio handle, the fragment of Doris's elevation dial, polished and marked with a single scratch. "A keepsake. Thought you'd want your lucky charm," he said, sliding it toward Avery. Avery ran his thumb along the edge, the faint groove where his adjustment had always rested. "Not luck," he said quietly. "Just learning." Jenkins leaned forward from the commander's hatch. "All right, gentlemen. We've got armor and infantry pinned down outside Saint-Lô. German anti-tank nests are everywhere. We're going to cut a path, one field at a time." The tank rumbled forward, joining a line of Shermans stretching across the valley. Overhead, the droning hum of American bombers rolled like thunder. The bombardment began. The earth shook, hedgerows collapsing under the force. Dust rose like storm clouds, blotting out the sun. And when it cleared, the advance began. "Gunners, eyes front!" Jenkins shouted over the roar. "Fire at anything that moves." Avery peered through his sight, movement flickered between the smoke and the trees. German half-tracks. A Pak 43 gun crew setting up. A Panzer IV pulling back into position. "Target spotted," he called. "Range 200. Load AP. Up." Avery fired. The round struck true, shredding the half-track in a burst of flame. Another shell followed, hitting the gun crew squarely. The new tank responded smoother, faster, but Avery still adjusted by instinct, his fingers making the same subtle twist. 1 inch down. The second armored advanced, blasting through the German defenses. The radio crackled with overlapping reports, tanks destroyed, ground taken, losses sustained. It was chaos, but forward motion meant survival. As they crested a small ridge, Jenkins froze. "Tiger. Left side, in the orchard." Avery's blood went cold. Through his sight, he saw it, a tiger eye, half camouflaged beneath branches, its gun swiveling toward them. Driver, pivot left. Russo, AP now. Up. Avery steadied the sight. His breathing slowed. The battlefield noise faded into a distant hum. The Tiger fired first. Its shell screamed across the field, slamming into the Sherman's front plate, and deflecting. The tank rocked violently, alarms blaring. Armor held. Russo yelled. "Shoot, Tom." Avery exhaled once. Adjusted down 1 inch. Fired. The shell struck the Tiger low, just above its transmission housing, the same weak point as the first Panzer he'd ever faced. The round punched through, sparks bursting from beneath the hull. The Tiger shuddered, then exploded in a cascade of smoke and flame. The crew inside Doris's successor erupted in cheers. Jenkins slapped Avery's shoulder. "Still got it, gunner. Still got that damn magic inch." Avery smiled faintly, but didn't speak. He just watched the Tiger burn, remembering every shot, every battle that had brought them here. By evening, St. Lo was theirs. The Germans had retreated, leaving behind the wreckage of tanks and trucks scattered through the orchards. The once green countryside was now a wasteland of ash and steel. As the sun dipped behind the smoke, Avery climbed out of the turret, standing on the hull. He looked toward the horizon, quiet now, save for the distant crack of small arms and the murmur of engines cooling in the twilight. Jenkins joined him, lighting a cigarette. "Hell of a run, huh?" Avery nodded. "Yeah. Feels like we've been fighting for miles and inches at the same time." Jenkins smirked. "That 1 inch of yours might have changed more than you know." Maybe it had. Maybe it hadn't. But in that moment, as the sky glowed orange over St. Lo, Avery knew one thing: precision had kept them alive where luck had failed. And long after the war, when people would speak of how the Americans fought the steel beasts of Germany with what they had, they'd tell the story of a gunner who changed everything with a single, 1-inch adjustment.